Okay, so this is a process video dealing with editing a model shot that you take on the terrace outside, maybe in a non-studio setting, but most importantly, playing with the sort of geometry of your project versus how the camera lens gave it to you. So I'm going to pick an image right here from a set that I took of a student's model, Alyssa from the Morning Studio, a few weeks ago. So from Apple Photos, I can edit with Photoshop, wherever your file is, that's fine. But as you see here, I've got a couple things that are drawing to your attention probably in a negative way, right? One is that line isn't quite vertical. This line is not horizontal. So I've got an issue there. Secondly, I've got my shoe. I've got this shadow distracting, and also it's a lot of blank space, right, in the page. I also have a fishing line in here because this model photo was taken before I rehung it. So one of the things we can do to start is we can actually play with things like rotation. So maybe I'll see what happens to sort of rotate this right away. And as I start to rotate, you can see I'm getting pretty close to up and down, right? A little bit of a vertical taper still, okay? So what I might do now to sort of play with this photo a little bit more is I might want to correct the vertical. So I'm going to hit enter after I've rotated this. So what I can do is going into filters, I can set up lens correction. Okay, and this is in another tutorial set about your own photography that aren't necessarily model-based. But under filter, lens correction, I'm going to go into custom, and in the tutorial videos about analytical photography, it comes up. But as I see, as I start pulling the verticals, I start getting closer, if not dead on, to up and down. And you can start to check it a little bit here. That's pretty darn close. Maybe it's a little far, so maybe I'll try a -7 for this, right? These numbers, these things, you start playing with these sliders. My horizontals, though, are pretty much straight on. So I don't have to mess with horizontals, and I've already rotated the image, but I can do that in here as well. Okay, so now that I've got this done, this manipulation, I'm basically set with a sort of projection here, right? That's set up. And actually, what's nice is I actually can verify. Come back here. I'm going to move this guideline. And by the way, guidelines at any point I can go over here to my rulers. You can always set your rulers with Command or Control R, or right here, View Rulers, and they're on. So now that I have this guideline, I actually can double check. Ooh, I'm just a little bit. If I'm picking nits here, as I should at this point, let me go back and actually do a lens correction again, and I'm going to pull this vertical out just a little bit more, right? There we go. That feels better. So now you can see I'm straight up and down. Okay? So in this photo, I've got the square of her image now, her diagram, I've pretty much defined, which is really what this model shot would have been about, right? A top view, the gestalt of it, the shadow projection. Okay? So now, when I've got this masking options, I can go in here and actually do some conversion, some overlays without touching the base image. So I'm going to go with black and white first, and through some of these adjustments in here, right, my preset, I'm going to find that the yellow filter is actually going to brighten this up a lot. And that's two reasons. One is any other color is going to either compete and make it muddy, but also the image has a lot of grays and browns in it, right? So I don't have a ton of color to mask anyway. So now that I've got this done, I can then set up and say, okay, so with this black and white, do I need to do anything with contrast, right? And it's like, okay, well, maybe I'll play with, I can put another overlay on top of brightness contrast, but this time I'll try the auto function first. Why not? And you can see, if anything, it actually took the brightness down a little bit, which doesn't shock me. It was a little bit bright, and contrast was barely up. I'm actually going to bump it a little bit more because this is meant to be a sort of model photo about that harsh edges. So you can see now I've got a really, really sharp image. And I'm going to now have these two overlay filters, and all they are just layer overlays. So I can keep one on, just the brightness, just the black and white, and so on. And these things are found down here. You can keep adding them, turning them on and off. Okay? Now I'm going to go to crop. So in the crop tool, playing with proportion, first things first, I might look to get my shoe out of the way. Okay, my shoe and that shadow of me down the bottom right there. Okay, that's one thing. But maybe I'm also going to look to center this image a little bit more. And you can start to use the guidelines here, and here to see how even I am to the edge of the square. And same thing up top. One of the things I did, because this is a poorly shot image by me, in my opinion, because the shadow is now off the page, I might have taken this photo a little bit different angle, and you guys probably will, to get that shot better, right? So again, the shadow goes off the page, but compositionally, I'm feeling pretty good about this baseline here, a little bit of concrete around it, and I'm keeping the original proportion of the photo. I don't have to, but if I start shrinking in too much, I don't want to lose that shadow. You can imagine I start to get a little bit less, I can use my arrow keys to move around. I'm getting a little bit less of that ground, a little bit more of the concrete. So I might do this to get a little bit even moving forward, right? Okay, so now that I've hit enter, I've cropped. Okay, I've cropped the image. I have these overlays. And so the last thing I might play with is, you see here, I actually took this picture with fishing line in it. And so one of the things I can do is Command plus or Control plus on the PC. I can actually make a fence or a window using this polygonal lasso tool. So if you hold this down, you have lasso tool and polygonal lasso. You also have magnetic. I would play a polygonal because of how many grays are in this image. And you can see, and actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to view, I'm going to clear my guides so I can actually now see, because this, I want to follow and track this figure right here. So I'm basically tracing with clicks the outside edges of Alyssa's model here. And this will allow me to only, when I'm going to use the clone stamp tool, and if you hit the delete key, you can always go backwards. So actually I want to get this fishing line. You can see the fishing line here. That's the shadow of the fishing line. That's the fishing line here. And I come around, and I'm just clicking, and I'm making a polygonal fence. Sorry, let's see, pulled over. Okay, so I've got this fence. As I zoom out, you can see this figure of the fishing line. And this is the magic now of Photoshop. If I go to my base layer, the layer that the image is on, I can use what's called the clone stamp tool right here. And you can see I can set sizes of the tool. You can see it's pretty small. And that could be maybe a little bit too small for this exercise. Might bump the size up a little bit. And now I have this circle here. And when I hold down the Option key, I pick the area I want to clone from. So I'm going to pick the outside edge of this image here. And as I start to clone, you can see the plus sign is what I'm tracing. And as long as the field is relatively even, you won't pick up on the clone as a negative. I'm now just clicking and tracing around this line. And because I'm fenced in, I can go over here and it's not hurting that part of the model. I'm selected in this region. And I can do another Option key because I picked up a little bit of the shadow by accident. Okay. And then again, if you think this is a little too distracting, of course you can come back here so I can play with it, right? But then lastly, I have to get rid of the fishing line itself, right? So as I zoom out, I was here, and now I'm here, okay? So that clone stamp allowed you to replace those figures. And so the last thing that I want to play with, right, is now I can do a layer flatten image, or I can save the PSD. So File, Save As, and I can do a PSD file, right? I can do a TIFF file, layers, or I can now flatten the image and File, Save As, and pick a smaller file size, a JPEG, right? So I can actually play with that sort of image file type and size that best suits my particular needs. And as I'm done here, voila, I now have an edited photo. And again, just to show you where we were to start, we were here, and through a transformation, we got to there. Okay? And